Kristen, we've got Kristen Welker here. And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Roberts.
This is how we get our country back. We need accountability.
President Trump facing a blizzard of headlines related to the Russia investigation. President Trump increasingly embattled because of the Russia investigation and increasingly lashing out. Listen to the language he used. And a bombshell report by the New York Times that the FBI opened up a counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Trump in 2017 amid concerns he wittingly or unwittingly was working for Russia. Did you ever see an investigation more in search of a crime and calling the probe Joseph McCarthy style witch hunt? So really digging in.
Because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
And joining me now is a key Trump ally, Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York. Congresswoman Stefanik, welcome to Meet the Press.
Great to be with you, Kristen.
You are one of Trump's strongest supporters. In his speech, President Biden cast the former president as a threat to democracy. This was an argument that was effective in 2020. It was a winning argument for Democrats in 2022. How do you answer that charge?
Well, first, Kristen, I wouldn't say it's a winning argument. In fact, in 2022, Democrats lost the House, and House Republicans ran on the issues that matter to the American people. We ran on securing the border. We ran on addressing the historic inflation, which the American people know is a result of Joe Biden's failed policies and the trillions of dollars of reckless spending. And what Joe Biden didn't mention in his speech were any of the policies that have created a crisis across America. So zero mention of the border, which is wide open and a top issue even in my home state in New York. You have Democrat mayors who are speaking out about Joe Biden's border crisis. No mention of inflation, which continues to be a concern for voters across my district. And when it comes to threats to democracy, Joe Biden and Democrats are a threat to democracy. We see them attempting to remove President Trump from the ballot. We saw this in Colorado and Maine. That is a suppression of the American people and the American people's ability to cast their ballots this November. So it's Democrats that are a threat to democracy.
Staying on this issue of January 6th, because of course Mr. Trump was talking about this. I want to pause for a minute and play some of the comments that you made on the evening of that day. Let's take a look.
Violence in any form is absolutely unacceptable. It is anti-American and must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Do you still feel as though that day was tragic and that those who were responsible should be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law?
Well, first of all, Kristen, as typical for NBC and the biased media, you played one excerpt of my speech. I stand by my comments that I made on the House floor. I stood up for election integrity, and I challenged and objected to the certification of the state of Pennsylvania because of the unconstitutional overreach. So I absolutely stand by my floor speech.
Tens of millions of Americans are concerned that the 2020 election featured unconstitutional overreach by unelected state officials and judges ignoring state election laws. In Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court and Secretary of State unilaterally and unconstitutionally rewrote election law, eliminating signature matching requirements.
I am proud to support President Trump, and I want to correct another statement you made that there is no coordination with Joe Biden and the Department of Justice in prosecutions against President Trump. We just saw Hunter Biden defy a congressional subpoena, and the White House admitting it was in coordination with Joe Biden the morning of. That is coordination, and I believe that Joe Biden will be found to be the most corrupt president in our nation's history, and that's why all of the investigative work that we're doing is so important, because the American people, they deserve transparency and accountability.
On the issue of election integrity, though, as you know, Trump took his case to court more than 60 times that there was fraud. He didn't win.
And they never point out that these
cases, they didn't lose on the merits. It was an issue of standing.
As you know, Trump took his case to court more than 60 times that there was fraud. He didn't win.
When you see the 60 court cases rejected, do you think that's a conclusion by our court system that there is no fraud, or do you think that the court cases were primarily rejected for procedural reasons?
The vast majority of these cases were rejected for procedural reasons, as opposed to merits-based or substantive-based evaluations.
I want to get back to this key question. Do you still think it was a tragic day? Do you think that the people who stormed the Capitol should be held responsible to the...
There seems to be two sets of rules. If your last name is Clinton or it's Biden, you get to live by a different set of rules than if you're an everyday patriotic American. So the real threat to our democracy is these baseless witch hunt investigations and lawsuits against President Trump, whether it's Tish James or whether we see in the D.C. Circuit Court. And that is undemocratic, and it's shredding our Constitution. And you know who agrees with me, Kristen? The American people. That's why President Trump is winning in poll after poll against Joe Biden.
The Justice Department has indicted a number of top-name Democrats as well, including the president's son, twice. So, I mean, a lot of critics would argue that undercuts your argument. There are two systems of justice.
If you want to try to, I want to answer that. If you want to make that case, the American people are very smart. They know that they tried to give Hunter Biden a sweetheart deal. We've heard from multiple IRS.
He's been indicted twice, Congresswoman.
But it was because of a judge that threw out a sweetheart deal that was negotiated on Joe Biden's behalf. Joe Biden and the Department of Justice have been withheld from going after the Biden crime family, which Joe Biden sits atop of.
Would you vote to certify, and will you vote to certify, the results of the 2024 election, no matter what they show?
Well, I voted not to certify the state of Pennsylvania because, as we saw in Pennsylvania and other states across the country, that there was unconstitutional acts circumventing the state legislature and unilaterally changing election law.
What about 2024?
We will see if this is a legal and valid election. What we're seeing so far is that Democrats are so desperate, they're trying to remove President Trump from the ballot. That is a suppression of the American people, and the Supreme Court is taking that case up in February. That should be a 9-0 to allow President Trump to appear on the ballot, because that's the American people's decision to make.
But just to be very clear, I don't hear you committed to certifying the election results. Will you only commit to certify the results if former President Trump wins? Does that mean if former President Trump wins?
No, it means if they are constitutional. What we saw in 2020 was unconstitutional circumventing of the Constitution, not going through state legislatures when it comes to changing election law.
Just to put a fine point on this, Mr. Trump, his allies did take their case, their concerns about the election to court more than 60 times. They lost every time.
Courts have not said there wasn't fraud. The courts just simply didn't rule on or hear from the fraud.
Trump, his allies did take their case, their concerns about the election to court more than 60 times. They lost every time.
The courts never looked at the facts. The courts don't like elections, and so they stayed out of it by finding an excuse, standing or otherwise, to stay out of it. But the fraud happened. The election in many ways was stolen, and the only way it'll be fixed is by, in the future, reinforcing the laws.
Mr. Trump hired 2 independent firms to investigate that. They came up short.
But we can't just say it didn't happen. We can't just say, oh, 4,000 people voted in Nevada that were non-citizens, and we're just going to ignore it. We're going to sweep it under the rug and say, oh, the courts have decided the facts. The courts have not decided the facts.
As well as the federal agency responsible for overseeing election security, CISA, said that the 2020 election was the most secure in American history.
Which I can't remember, is that CISA group that declared this the most secure election in our history?
Yes, sir. That was the joint Government Coordinating Council and Sector Coordinating Council statement.
So to say it was the safest election, sure, I agree with your statement if you're referring to foreign intervention. But if you're saying it's the safest election based on no dead people voted, no non-citizens voted, no people broke the absentee rules, I think that's false. And they're taking your statement to mean, oh, well, there was no problem in the elections. I don't think you examined any of the problems that we've heard here.
I want to ask you about something that former President Trump recently said. He referred to migrants as, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. This is language that the Biden campaign, others, says, quote, is parroting Adolf Hitler. Are you comfortable with former President Trump's comments?
Well, yet again, we have the media, which is so biased, which is reiterating whatever the talking points the Biden campaign is giving.
I'm giving you the opportunity to respond. I'm just giving you the opportunity to respond.
Our border crisis is poisoning Americans through fentanyl.
Let's talk about what's happening at the border.
I don't think any banana republic or third world country has had a border like this. So who could want this to happen? Marxists, fascists, communists, maybe they have a different theory on this than you would have or I would have. It's killing our country. They're destroying the blood of our country, and it's a horrible thing. And don't forget, you have people, many people from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions. You have terrorists pouring in.
It is poisoning people, and you know why? Because of Joe Biden's wide-open border, that executive actions he took on day one. So yes, I stand by President Trump, and President Trump also has he has the strongest record when it comes to supporting the Jewish people and supporting the state of Israel.
Let's talk very quickly about what's happening on Capitol Hill. As you know, the Senate locked in these fierce negotiations over the border and border security.
Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer in the Senate have failed to take up our Secure the Border Act, which we passed. It has strong policies returning to the very effective border security policies of President Trump, including construction of a border wall, ending catch and release, returning to remain in Mexico.
Very quickly, are you ruling out supporting a government shutdown, something that you've said you're
opposed to? We don't support
shutting
shutting down the government, but we must secure the border. We must secure the border. That's where the American people are. We're losing our country in front of our very eyes. And so the person who's threatening a government shutdown is Joe Biden, who refuses to secure the border.
Former President Trump, in his interview with me, said he, quote, likes the concept of picking a woman as his vice president. If called upon, would you serve as his vice president?
Well, I, of course, would be honored to serve in any capacity in a Trump administration. I'm proud to be the first member of Congress to endorse his reelection. I'm proud to be a strong supporter of President Trump, and he's going to win this November.
Have you spoken to the former president about the possibility of running as his VP pick?
I'm not going to get into the content of my conversation with President Trump. I talk to him frequently, and we need to make sure that President Trump is in the strongest position to win in the general election. That's what I've been focused on, and that's what I'm going to remain focused on.
Just to put a very fine point on it, it sounds like you're saying if he were to ask you, the answer would be yes?
Well, I've said for a year now I'd be honored to serve in the next Trump administration.
I am your voice.
Everybody is feeling inflation. What is the most impactful thing you could do on day one in the White House to change the course of inflation?
Drill, baby, drill. We got to get oil way down. We got to get gasoline down to under $2, which we'll be able to do pretty easily.